The House Above the Trees, Ethel Cook Eliot. Chapter 1. The Lonely Child. Hepatica was standing in the hot sunshine on the edge of a dusty country road, looking over a stone wall into an orchard. She was 8 years old. All the dress she had on was a sky-blue slip hardly reaching to her knees, and her feet were bare and scratched by the stones and briars. There was a ragged tear in the sky-blue slip, but for all her shabbiness, Hepatica was clean. She liked to be clean, though nobody had ever taught her. It was just a feeling she had. She was pale and slim. Her hair was dark and cloud-like, and floated about her head almost to her shoulders in a blown way. Her eyes were wide apart and clear gray, and they looked out with such a level, quiet gaze that thinking people had sometimes paused a minute to wonder about the lonely child. Today Hepatica was especially lonely because the children playing across the wall in the orchard would not let her play with them. If left to themselves, perhaps those girls and boys would have welcomed Hepatica to their games, in spite of her poverty and motherlessness. But their nurse had said she is a charity child, boarded out here to the farmer by the government. She has just come from the city where she worked in a factory and lived in a slum. She never had a mother to teach. Her manners are good behaviors. She is not a fit playmate for you. And the children's mother had said, when they asked her about the strange child who stood so often looking into the orchard, "Don't invite her in. She may look on at your games if she wants to. The road is free to all, but never play with her. See how ragged she is." So the children had stared at her curiously, but they had not answered when Hepatica said hello. They had turned back to their play instead. It was very cool and shady in the orchard, and the wavering shadows made magic for the little city girl. For Hepatica loved beauty, though she could not have told you why. It was just a feeling she had, like the feeling for cleanliness. And then, in all her life, she had never seen children play so light-heartedly as these children played. They ran about among the trees and leapt back and forth across the little brook that flowed through the orchard, and they laughed constantly. The little three girls were all in white. Even their socks and sandals were white. Their golden curls, tied with butterfly ribbons, made Hepatica think of stories of princesses that somebody must have told her back in a forgotten time. There were two boys with darker cropped curls, and they too were in white. And then there was the baby. They called her that because she was the youngest, but she was 4 years old. The baby climbed up on the stone wall now and stared at Hepatica. She was rather spoiled, being the youngest, and so she talked to Hepatica in spite of what her mother and the nurse had said. "Why do you wear a hole in your dress?" she asked. "I have no thread to mend it with," Hepatica smiled and answered gravely. "Was your mother a witch?" was the child's next question. "Why, no," Hepatica said. "I am sure she wasn't a witch, but I don't know anything about her truly except that she was beautiful." "How do you know that?" It was one of the boys now. All the children were lined up listening and expectant on the other side of the wall. Hepatica looked at him, puzzled herself. "I only feel that she was beautiful. No one ever told me, but the things I feel are always truest." "I don't know what you mean by that." Hepatica could not make it any clearer for him. Instead, she went on. "Sometimes I think she was a queen, and that I'm a princess. Sometimes it seems as though that must be true. How the children laughed at that. "Why," cried the oldest little girl, "you are a charity child. Nurse said so. You work for Miss Horn, the farmer's wife, and you are all ragged. Princesses don't wear frocks with holes in them. Well, of course, I don't really know I'm a princess. I can't know, for there's no one to tell me who my mother was, but I like to think I may be a princess, and I wouldn't be surprised if I am one." The children burst into peals of laughter. "You're telling stories," they cried. "Oh, just listen to her, telling the biggest stories. Why, you're so poor that Mother won't let us play with you. We aren't a queen's children, but our mother is very rich. We aren't allowed to play with poor children. How can you tell us that your mother was more beautiful than ours, and finer?" "Oh no," cried Hepatica, tears in her clear eyes. "I said no such thing. I never even saw your mother, so how can I know? You don't understand at all. Well, anyway, don't try to come across the wall into our orchard," warned the oldest girl, a little calmer. "Even if you are a princess, Nurse wouldn't like it. Better run along and wash Miss Horn's dishes anyway. I hear her calling you." The children did not really mean to be cruel, but they were very proud of their mother, who they very well knew was the finest and richest lady in that part of the country. So Hepatica's boasts of a queen for a mother had angered them, but Hepatica had only told the truth. In spite of her utter poverty, she did think herself a princess, and always when she thought about the mother whom, try as hard as she would, she could not remember, she felt that she was so beautiful she must have been a queen. And now, in spite of the ragged sky-blue slip and her wind-blown, ruffled hair, she did look suddenly proud like a princess. "Of course, I won't come into your orchard. I thought it was a beautiful place until now, and your mother needn't be afraid. I'll try to play with you, for I wouldn't, not for anything, and I will go back to wash the dishes." She turned away from the orchard as she spoke, but did not step down into the road for a minute, for her eyes were so full of sudden tears that she could not see. And in that minute of tear-blindedness, the wonderful thing happened to her, the wonderful thing that led to all her happiness, and cured her forever of her loneliness. What was it? Listen, the wonderful thing was a thought. For yes, it is true that no truly wonderful thing comes to any of us unless the thought comes first. This was her thought. Don't cry. If you can keep the tears out of your eyes, you may see something splendid. It came to her rather like a clear memory. Perhaps Hepatica had heard someone say the words at some time, but it may have been the apple orchard speaking, out of its old knowledge, to the lonely child. The important thing is not where the thought came from, but that she obeyed it, and bravely forced the tears back from her eyes. And then she did see something splendid that she would not have seen at all if her eyes had been even the least bit misty. She would have passed it over altogether, and so perhaps have lost forever this opportunity for happiness. It was a wind creature. Now Hepatica had sometimes, though rarely, seen wind creatures before, but always from the factory window, and then only in the rush of their passing. Never had she seen one so close. The wind creature looked to be about 12 or 14 years old. He was walking along the edge of the road, his purple wings folded down his back. He was dressed in a purple tunic, just to his knees, a garment not unlike the sky-blue slip Hepatica was wearing, except that his was the color of early morning. His head was tilted back as he walked, his joyous eyes scanning the treetops. He noticed the children, however, as he drew near and lowered his gaze to them. They were all up on the stone wall now, jeering at Hepatica. She stood down by the dusty road, her back to them, her eyes clear as the day. The wind creature noticed the children, but only as you might notice flowers, in the same impersonal way. He looked them directly in their faces, without expectation, for he knew very well that they could not see him, that he was not so much as a shadow to them, for never had this wind creature known a human child who could see the forest people. So his glance passed over the daintily frocked little girls with their butterfly bows, and the boys with their cropped curls, and was just about to pass over clear-eyed Hepatica when it stopped short. For wonder upon wonders, she was looking directly at him and smiling in a friendly fashion. He could hardly believe his eyes, but he smiled back. No one could have helped it, so welcoming and expectant was Hepatica's face. But in his amazement he did not speak to her. Instead he backed out of the road, and still looking and smiling at Hepatica, moved backward into the green forest that came down to the other side of the road. The evening sunlight struck level through the trees, and almost at once Hepatica lost him in the golden glare it made. The children in the orchard had seen nothing. They were calling, "Goodbye, Princess," "Take our regards to your Queen Mamma," and all the other taunts they could think of, but Hepatica had stopped hearing them. All her thoughts were with the wind creature, who had backed away into the golden evening light. He had backed away, it is true, but his eyes, full of surprised friendliness, had never wavered from hers. All Hepatica's loneliness slipped from her. She had had a glimpse of a comrade. She did not answer the children in the orchard again, but crossed the road and went into the forest. She walked straight in among the trees, looking ahead into the golden light for the wind creature, but he was not there. If I am to find him, I must manage to go around the edge of the light, she said to herself. Just going straight ahead like this won't take me anywhere. She stopped and stood very still, so still that she heard the separate leaves moving on the trees. Around the edge, somehow around the edge, but how? And then, in a flash, she saw the way, and she did actually move around the edge of that level golden light, and stood not just within the forest, but within of the forest. Hepatica was very happy. It was so easy, she exclaimed, and then she wondered why she had never found the way before, for truly she had always known it was there. She was lost at once. Still, there was no reason for her to try to find the way out. No one wanted her or needed her in the world. Miss Horne had said many times that she was much more bother than she was worth. Even all the dishes she washed, and all the errands she ran, and all the vegetables she cleaned did not make up to Miss Horne for the trouble of having a child in the house, and since Miss Horne would be the only person in the world to Miss Hepatica, the child very wisely decided that she had a perfect right to go on. But where was the wind creature? Why had he not waited for her? Well, she would not cry even at that, for probably he had not thought she could find the way. She kept her eyes clear and went on. It was dusk under the trees. All about her were the sounds of breezes and shy animals and birds rustling to bed. Away off, a forest brook was singing sleepily. With clear eyes, Hepatica walked slowly deeper and deeper into this twilight forest, the other side of the level golden light. Chapter 2. The Leaf Pouch House. Have you ever been alone in the woods on the edge of night? It is a strange time there. The earth smells damp, and it smells dark green. For hearing and seeing and smelling are intermingled in us more than we know. Now the tall bracken surrounded Hepatica up to her waist. All the spots of light and the wavering shadows of afternoon had gone, and there was just one great shadow in all the forest, growing deeper and deeper every minute. Oh, if only the wind creature would come now! Hepatica would not mind the growing dark and the night whisperings, but it had never occurred to the wind creature that Hepatica would follow him into the within of the forest. He was thinking and wondering much about her in this minute, but alas for Hepatica, he was away at the other edge of the forest, miles and miles away, playing with the other wind creatures on an open windy hill. Even now Hepatica did not cry. She had no thought of crying, for she must keep her eyes very clear indeed, clearer than ever before in her life, if nothing was to go wrong with her now. Soon it was too dark for her to walk farther. She stood still, trying hard to see into the forest aisles with her clear eyes. For some time there was nothing but velvet darkness. She was glad. Then of the ferns around her knees. They were real and friendly. She put her hands down and felt them in the dark. Then there was a spot of light, white and steady, a little way ahead. The moon was coming up behind the forest, but Hepatica did not know that. This was the first ray of its light that had found its way down through the forest roof. Hepatica was glad of the light and moved towards it. It grew even as she moved. And then she saw that there was something more than light there. It was something very still but alive. Hepatica hesitated. As the moonlight grew brighter, she saw that someone was standing in the circle of light. Well, if it was really a person, why did the person stand so still? Hepatica paused and wondered. She took a few slow steps forward. Then she stopped in good earnest. That the someone had moved just a turned head, and Hepatica knew that she was being watched. If the strange person saw a little girl alone and lost in the forest, why did the strange person not speak? I am afraid, thought Hepatica. But no, it was not the true Hepatica who thought that, for now came another thought answering it back. No, you are not afraid. First keep your eyes clear of tears, then you will see. But when you see, you must not be afraid, or you will stop seeing, and then it will be as though you had never seen. So Hepatica held her head high and moved forward, right up to the light. It was a lady who stood so still in it, looking down without surprise at the lost little girl, quite as though she had been expecting and waiting for me, thought Hepatica. The very first words the lady spoke showed that Hepatica's thought was true. It didn't take you long, Hepatica. I have only just come. It seemed long to me, said Hepatica. It was so dark, and I couldn't find the wind creature. I thought he would be here behind the light. How did you know he was a wind creature? Who told you that? Why, no one told me. Hepatica thought a minute. But he looked like it, his purple wings, you know, the way he walked. He looked just like the wind when it walks between the trees and runs over the grass and the meadows. I have felt the wind often, enough even in the city to know when I see one of its people. But you can't see the wind, can you? Asked the lady. No, not exactly, but I can feel it perfectly, and so when I did see the wind creature, I knew that he looked like the wind feels. All this time Hepatica was gazing right up into the lady's face, and now she stopped trying to explain and cried, "You know it all better than I. Why do you ask me about it?" "Do I know it?" asked the lady, still grave and questioning. "How do you know that, please?" "Because, oh, because you look like knowing feels." Then the lady bent down a little and took Hepatica's 2 hands in hers and said, "Welcome to the forest. Your eyes are clear enough, so you may stay. And may I stay with you?" The lady laughed. It was like all the whispering, singing sounds of the forest turned into a sudden laugh. "What a strange, brave little girl you are. Do you know what you are asking? I am Tree Mother. No one stays with me, not even the littlest forest child, though he comes nearer too it than any. I am the mother of the wood. I live high over it. Although I am Tree Mother and have so many children, they seldom see me. I watch over them and care for them just the same. But you shall learn all this and more. It is time for sleep now. Wait." Tree Mother looked off over Hepatica's head for a while. Although Hepatica did not hear her speak, it came to her that the lady was asking a question of the still dark forest. Then Tree Mother bent again and took Hepatica's hand. "Come," she said. "Yes, you shall do what no one has ever done. You shall stay with me, as long as your eyes are clear enough and as long as it is well." Hepatica was happy, for here she was, a human child, in the within of the forest, to be cared for by the Tree Mother herself. Her dream of dreams had come true. Perhaps this was her one own mother, whom she had lost long ago, and could not remember. Tree Mother heard her thoughts. "Doesn't matter whether I am your own mother, so long as I am mother. All real mothers are mother. There is no own about it." She was leading Hepatica down a moonlit aisle of the forest. At last they stood in shadowless moonlight in a little clearing. There were dog-tooth violets, yellow as the moon, and star flowers, and the delicate but sturdy flower after which Hepatica was named. The grass was like a lawn starred with wild flowers. A great beech tree rose up in the middle of it. Its leaves and branches looked black against the moonlight, but the sound of their breathing and movement was green. Tree Mother put her hand on the dark trunk. "This is the stair to my house," she said. "We must climb." Tree Mother went ahead, never letting go of Hepatica's hand. The branches were very close together, and the climb was rather like going up difficult stairs. But Hepatica did not mind the difficulty, for did not Tree Mother have her safely by the hand? As they ascended, the moonlight grew brighter and brighter, and when they had almost reached the top, there was the moon, large, round, beautiful, away off at the edge of the world, flooding the wood with light. Now they were in the smaller swaying branches near the top of the tree. Hepatica clung a little to Tree Mother's hand, which stayed very steady, and now they were at the very top, and Hepatica thought the branches must break under them, for they were light and waving as far away as she could see, a vast green sea of treetops. Tree Mother stood erect and swaying, her sandaled feet resting on the tossing boughs ever so lightly. She turned and looked down at Hepatica, balancing beside her. "Were you afraid?" she asked. "Not with you," said Hepatica. "That is well." Now Hepatica, in this moon radiance, saw Tree Mother for the first time plainly. She had known that she was beautiful all along, because of her voice, but she had not known how beautiful. "Why, she is only a girl," she thought. It was true, Tree Mother, in spite of being mother of all the wood, was very like a girl. She was straight and slim and dressed in a short blue tunic. Her hair, to be sure, was white, but not as an old woman's is white. It was like the foam of a wave, and the gleam, with the same misty shining. And her face, Hepatica had to close her eyes a minute, for it was too beautiful for a human child to see. "Do not be afraid, do not be afraid," she whispered to herself. Or was it Tree Mother's voice that said it? For Tree Mother was speaking. Hepatica opened her eyes and met those other eyes of splendor in the moonlight. "Now we must jump," Tree Mother said. "Right off the tree," cried Hepatica. "Yes, right off into the moonlight. That is the only way to get to my house. I will go first, you follow. Now watch and do just as I do." With these words, she let go of Hepatica's hand and leapt up and out from the springing boughs and into the moonlight. Then she was lost to Hepatica in the moon radiance, just as the winged creature had been lost in the sun glow. Can you imagine how Hepatica felt, left alone there in the topmost tossing branches of the great beech? When she found herself without the support of Tree Mother's hand, she tottered and came very near falling. In the flash of time, while she was unbalanced, she had to decide what she would do: sit down and try to climb back down to the safe ground again, or leap straight out and up as Tree Mother had done. For one of the two she must do, just to save herself from falling all the long way down to the ground. Of course she decided to leap. She closed her eyes and then sprang, holding her breath, out and up into the radiant moonlight, and right at once there was Tree Mother holding her hand again, and smiling happily because Hepatica had been so brave. "This is my house," said Tree Mother. Hepatica looked around. It was like the treetops in its swaying, tossing motion, but the floor was closely woven, living branches, and there was no danger of falling through. The roof and sides were of the same woven branches, grown thick with silvery leaves. The room was round, and there were openings in the leafy walls on all sides for windows, and there was a sky window too, in the middle of the round ceiling. Through all the windows the moonlight and the night air streamed. It was a sky house of just one room, but it served all Tree Mother's needs. Pine boughs made a low couch in the middle of the floor, and over them was thrown a sky-blue robe. That was all the furniture Hepatica saw, but the boughs and the silvery leaves and the moon radiance made it a room fit for a queen. "Have you had supper?" asked Tree Mother. No, Hepatica had not eaten since noon, but she had quite forgotten that until Tree Mother spoke. "Well, tomorrow there will be plenty for you down in the forest. Sleep is as good now." Then Tree Mother helped Hepatica out of her torn blue slip. "We are wearing the same color," she said. "See, my tunic is blue too, and so are the robes." Hepatica lay down on the soft, sweet-scented bed, and Tree Mother covered her with the blue robe folded at its foot. It was as cool and light as the night air. "Sleep now," said Tree Mother, "and in the morning adventures will begin. Good night." "Are you going to sleep too?" "I shall lie down by you, but I do not sleep. I must be off across the forest roof soon. Someone needs me. Now good night." "But I cannot sleep," whispered Hepatica. "It is too wonderful to sleep in a sky house." "Yes, you can sleep, and all the better for being in a sky house. Stop thinking about it all, and let the forest think through you. You will sleep then easily enough. Good night." Tree Mother lay down beside Hepatica. She lay very straight on her back, her arms above her head, looking up through the sky window to the white-winged clouds racing in the moonlight. Hepatica stayed still as a mouse at her side. looking at Tree Mother and feeling sure that she was far too happy to sleep. But sleep she did, and in her dreams Tree Mother put her arms around her at last and slipped far out into the night sky, with her arms about Hepatica like a safe boat in which she was swept along. But that was only a dream, for all the while Hepatica was sound asleep, rocked in the leaf bow house. Chapter 3. Morning in the Wood. Let the forest think through you, were almost the last words that the Tree Mother had said to Hepatica before she fell asleep, and she had managed to obey, even while she slept, for as she woke, the forest was truly thinking through her. They were far away. Strange, beautiful thoughts. The forests. The minute Hepatica was awake, the forest thoughts fled from her mind, and she had her own clear thoughts as usual. She sat up on the pine bough couch and looked about her. Sunshine was warm on her face. Near and far were bird calls, and all the sweet earth, air, and tree smells. The leaf bow house was surely an enchanting place to wake in. But where was Tree Mother? Hepatica remembered Tree Mother had said she would not sleep there, but must go where someone needed her. Well, she had also said that Hepatica would find food down in the forest, and the child was very, very hungry. I must get down somehow myself, she thought. One is meant only to sleep here, for there is nothing but the bed, no tables or chairs. If Tree Mother should come home and find me here waiting and hungry and doing nothing, she would not call me brave again. I must be as brave as she thinks me. But how was she to get down? She went to one of the windows and looked out. Tree Mother's house was just a little above the forest roof. What held it up there, poised in air? Hepatica could not see while she was still in it. Perhaps it was the tallest tree of all in the forest that held it. Hepatica determined to jump down into the forest roof. She knew it was only the waving tops of trees, where the branches are only twigs, and through which one may fall down, down, bump to the brown forest floor. But she thought, Tree Mother would not have left me alone if she had not known that I could get down safely. The window was only an inch or so above the floor, so Hepatica did not have to climb up onto the sill. She simply leapt over, this time with eyes wide open and breathing naturally, and down into the trembling green treetops. They received her gently, bending under her weight, and dropped her softly down into barer branches, where she clung, hanging by her hands at first and swinging out into space. But soon she found a branch strong enough to bear her, and begun her climb down. Not without a few bruises, though, and another tear in the sky-blue slip. When she reached the ground, she saw that she had climbed down the same great beech that she and Tree Mother had gone up last night. There was the circular open space there where the starflowers and the dog-tooth violets, and there were the hepaticas, the flower after which she was named. So she had come the right way down Tree Mother's stair. But what was that sweet smell? Hepatica had never been out of the city until a few days ago, and she had never heard of wild strawberries. Even a city child may follow a smell, however, and Hepatica had soon traced this one to the little red berries under their leaves in the grass. She picked one, looked at it, and smelled it. That brought it close to her lips, and of all a sudden she ate it. Think of tasting wild strawberries for the first time, and think of tasting them when you are as hungry as Hepatica was. Down she went on her hands and knees to search for more. She ate them as fast as she found them. But I should like some water too, she thought. I am thirsty as well as hungry. Even as she thought it, she heard water bubbling over stones, and followed the sound to a cold forest stream. She knelt down on its brink and drank from her cupped hands. Then she slipped off her frock and stepped down into the water. That was a brave thing for a city child who cannot swim to do. But the stream was not deep, coming only up to her knees. She washed herself with the palms of her hands, and even ducked her head under the clear water. When she came out, she shook her cloud-like hair to dry in the sun, and went on picking and eating more berries. She was dry in a very few minutes, and put on her old blue slip. Then she discovered a little forest path, with a pine needle carpet. It went wandering off among tall pine trees. This was the first time Hepatica had ever had the delight of following a strange path through a wood. And oh, might all such followings end so magically, for it ended in an open door in a tree. When Hepatica saw that the path ran right up to a tree and ended there, she thought, "Is this another of Tree Mother's stairways?" But when she saw the narrow open green door, she wondered more. And when she came up to the door and looked in, she wondered even more. She was looking right into a neat little kitchen, although it was a very little kitchen. Even so, it seemed too large to be inside a tree trunk. But so it was, and it was the kitchen of the Tree Man's house. The Tree Man's daughter was just putting breakfast on the table for her father and herself. She is a shy forest girl, lovely to look at, with her hair like a brown forest brook, her shy, kind brown eyes, and her light movements. Her father, the Tree Man, stood by an open window, watching her. His long white beard reached almost to the ground, and his eyes were dark and musing, but keen too. He was the first of the two to see Hepatica, standing in the open doorway. He looked at her much as the wind creature had looked at her the day before, as you might look at a flower without any thought of it looking back at you. It never entered his head that this little human girl could see him or his daughter or even the door into the tree. But when Hepatica smiled at him, he did not show surprise, for the Tree Man is too old and too wise to feel surprise at anything that may happen, even in his quiet forest world. "Good morning," he said calmly, in a voice like the wind in treetops. "You have arrived just in time for breakfast." The tree girl almost dropped the bowl of milk that she was carrying to the table, and gazed at Hepatica with amazement. "Good morning," answered Hepatica, still standing in the doorway. "Is there enough? I don't want to take yours." "Are you hungry?" asked the Tree Man. Now the berries certainly had not satisfied Hepatica's hunger, so she said truly, "Yes, I am rather hungry." "Then there is surely enough," said the Tree Man. "Come here." Hepatica stepped over the low bark doorsill and went up. To him. He looked down into her eyes steadily for a whole minute. At last he spoke, putting his hands on her still damp hair. "Your eyes are clearer than spring dawn. They are clearer than raindrops. They are as clear as the early morning sky. I do not understand this in a human, but so it is. And are you hungry? Well, breakfast is ready." Now, if the tree girl is very shy, she is very motherly too, although she cannot be over 14 years old. So to hear that Hepatica was hungry was enough for her. She ran to add another bowl of milk to the table, and a carved wooden spoon. This, with a loaf of rich golden brown bread, made a delicious meal. The three sat down to the little three-legged green table in the open doorway. The tree girl, sitting opposite Hepatica, watched her shyly, but gladly, for it did her heart good to see the hungry child eat with such relish. The tree man said never a word, but he looked at Hepatica so intently that before the meal was finished, she felt as though he had asked her many questions and got answers to all of them. And this was true. In that short time she had told him much more about herself than she could ever have put into words. What a happy breakfast party it was! The little room was all a shimmer, with light falling through green leaves, and it was a sparkle with cleanliness, for the tree girl is the best of housekeepers. There was a shelf of brown and yellow bowls, cups and saucers, and under them pots and pans, silver and gold, hanging in orderly rows. In the middle of the floor lay a loosely woven grass robe, with brightly colored birds and flowers and leaves woven into it. The tree man had made that, and he had made the chairs on which they were sitting. And the three-legged table. Nothing was crudely made, although all was simple, for the tree man is an artist. The very spoon that Hepatica was using for bread and milk was carved with delightful pictures of curly-headed forest children breathing flowers. "How did you come to wander so far into the forest?" asked the tree girl at last. "And where did you sleep last night?" Hepatica found herself talking as she had never talked before. For the first time there was someone who seemed to care what happened to her in the past and what might happen to her in the future. She told the tree girl about her work in the factory, how she had worked there for almost as long as she could remember, how she had no father and no mother, how she had lived in the city slum, how hot it was in the summer, how cold in the winter, how loveless and how forlorn, and then how suddenly she had been sent by the government, after she had been very ill, to live in the country and work for Miss Horne, the farmer's wife. Then she told them about the orchard which had seemed so beautiful to her until the children playing there had jeered at her and sent her home. Then of her tears and the way she drove them back and cleared her eyes. And last of all, the wind creature. "That must have been Cloud," cried the tree girl, forgetting her shyness and her excitement. "He is the bravest, the fleetest, the most splendid and solitary of the wind creatures. He will hardly make friends with his own kind, so I expect, Hepatica, he'll pretend not even to see a human child like you." When she saw that Hepatica was hurt so quickly, she added, "Don't be sorry, Hepatica. The forest is full of playmates for you once they come to believe that you can really see them and will not pretend that they are not real. You won't need Cloud, I assure you. You could never keep up with him anyway. He is far too fleet and proud for a playmate." "He smiled at me," said Hepatica. "But you see, he didn't stay. He backed away," said the tree girl. The tree man looked at his daughter over Hepatica's bowed head. "We would have thought it impossible half an hour ago for a human child to find her way here at all, much less see us when she did get here, so we cannot say whom she may or may not have for a comrade here. We shall have to wait and see." Hepatica was made happy again by the wise treeman's words. Now, life in the forest is just as full of tests for its people as life in the world. So now there came a test to Hepatica, and it was a very important test, for really everything hung upon it. Tree Girl asked again the question that Hepatica had not answered. "Where did you sleep last night?" It was on Hepatica's lips to say, "With Tree Mother," I am to live with her now, in her high leaf bow house. When she remembered that Tree Mother had said that no forest person had ever dreamed of doing that, not even the littlest forest child, and when she remembered that, with the instinct of the fine little girl that she was, she merely said, "In the top of a tree." Why, because she, who was so new in the forest, did not like to tell them that already she had found the very best and highest in it. They would have to find that out for themselves, if they were to find it out at all. Hepatica could not know that if she had boasted of keeping company with Tree Mother, she might have lost the forest as suddenly as she had found it. But she had not boasted, and so she had met the test. After breakfast, she helped the tree girl brush up the crumbs and straighten the room. Then they carried the bowls and spoons out to the stream to wash them. They washed them with leaves and grass, standing out in the stream up to their knees. Then back to the tree house they went, for the tree girl had told Hepatica she would show her how to mend the tear in her frock. The tree girl's sewing basket was made of pine cones, and was full of twists of different colored threads. Hepatica was delighted with it. It was so like a rainbow. The tree girl, after hunting a little, found a twist of sky blue to match Hepatica's frock, and then, very patiently and carefully, she showed Hepatica how to make the stitches. "This is a lovely blue," exclaimed the tree girl. "It is strange to see a little human girl in such a pretty dress." Hepatica gasped. She had thought herself very shabbily dressed, indeed, but she had liked the color and had sometimes told herself that she would not exchange it for the silk of the rich city children. She was pleased by the tree girl's praise. "I like yours too," she said, touching the tree girl's dress. "It is the color of the aspen leaves." This was true. There was a silver glimmering over its green. It was a tunic like Tree Mother's, belted with a grass chain. The tree girl laughed. "That is not strange, Hepatica," she said, "for look closer and you will see that it is made of aspen leaves." "Oh, how wonderful!" cried Hepatica, in pleased astonishment. "Did you sew all those leaves together yourself?" "Oh yes, I make my own clothes, of course. In the autumn I have the prettiest red and yellow and russet frocks, leaves, you know, and in the winter I wear white. Tree Mother gives us our white snowflake-like materials. I don't know where she gets them, but we almost all wear the colors of the forest. All except Tree Mother. She wears sky blue like yours. We think it is a piece of the sky." "Is yours a piece of the sky?" Hepatica laughed. "Oh no, it is just an old faded bit of cloth that was given to me by a strange lady in the city months ago." "Well, it's the color of the sky anyway, and it makes me think of Tree Mother. Do you know Tree Mother?" Hepatica asked a little shyly. "Only as we all know her," answered the tree girl, quietly smiling with sudden happiness. "She is always there, of course, when we are in trouble, and I think she is there when we are the happiest too. No one knows where she lives exactly, so of course we can't go hunting her up for ourselves." Oh, how glad Hepatica was then that she had not boasted. Of sleeping in Tree Mother's leaf bow house her very first night in the forest. But anyway, the tree girl went on, she is a beautiful mother to us all. Even my father calls her mother, though she seems only a girl, and he is so old and so wise. But he says that if he were as old and as wise as she is, he would be young again too. That is strange, but it is true, for father says so. She must be wonderful, breathed Hepatica. She is, and some day you may see her. It is wonderful even to see her. While they talked, Hepatica's dress was fast getting mended. When it was done, they went out under the tree where the tree man was carving a doll for the littlest forest child out of a bit of wood. "Father, will you ask Hepatica to live with us?" asked the tree girl. "It must be cold sleeping in a tree top, and she is too little a girl to be all alone, even in our forest." The tree man turned and looked down into Hepatica's eyes. When the tree man looked down at her with his musing dark eyes, Hepatica almost thought she knew what the birds were singing all through the forest, and what the brook was saying over and over to itself on its long journey. But she listened to his voice, and so missed perfectly understanding the others. "Yes, of course, I will ask her if she would like to live with us," he said. "Thank you," answered Hepatica. "I can't tell you why, but I like the treetop very much, and I can find my meals in the forest. The berries are so good." "Oh, but she is too little," cried the tree girl. "She must make a home with some of us." "Do not worry about Hepatica, little daughter," said the tree man. "She will do very well. Whenever she wants, she may come to us. Meanwhile, her clear eyes will take her along the right forest paths." Hepatica listened hard to hear what the birds and the brook were saying as she spoke, but she could not quite make it out. When he stopped, it was just birdsong and brook babbling again. There was a sudden stir of wind among the leaves and grass, and to Hepatica's delight, Cloud, the very wind creature she had seen by the orchard, came running up the forest trail towards them. It was plain to see how amazed he was to find Hepatica sitting there in the doorway of the tree house with the forest people. He even took a few steps backward, as if he were going to back away again, but then he thought better of it, tossed his head proudly, and free and undismayed, came on. "Something for my daughter to mend?" asked the tree man as he came near. "Yes, my sandal. 2 of the thongs got wrenched off between some boulders down by the sea last night. We had a fine time racing the waves by moonlight." Cloud stood on one foot and pulled off a sandal. The tree girl took it and looked it over carefully to see just what it needed. The tree girl is not a seamstress, but many of the forest people have a way of acting as though she were, for they coolly bring their tears and holes to her to mend. It is she, too, who ties up cut fingers and takes out splinters. Cloud had no doubt that she would be glad to mend the sandal with which he had been so careless, and so she was. "This is Hepatica," explained the tree man, laying his hand on Hepatica's head as she sat beside him. "She has come to live in the forest, and she sleeps like you in the top of a tree." "In the top of a tree? A little girl like that?" Cloud was looking at her in earnest now. "I sleep in the top of a tree too, the very tallest one I could find. I wonder if perhaps I haven't found one taller," said Hepatica shyly. Cloud tossed his head. "Not likely," he cried, laughing. "Hepatica won't live with us," said the tree girl. "I think she's too little to live alone in the forest." Suddenly Hepatica was afraid that the tree man was going to tell Cloud that she had followed him into the forest and wanted him for her playmate, but the tree man had no idea of saying that. He was wise enough to know that friendship must come to life of itself, that there can be no suggesting it. But he did say, "You had better show the little stranger the wood, Cloud. My daughter has promised to tell the forest children stories this morning, and all the afternoon she will be picking berries to preserve. Hepatica will be wandering about alone." At that, Hepatica held her breath. For one brief instant, Cloud looked down at her from where he stood. His proud purple eyes met her quiet, clear ones. He smiled but looked away. "She's too little and too human to play with us wind creatures," he said a little sulkily. "Oh no, truly I'm not," Hepatica cried softly but earnestly. How she wished she might tell him now that she had jumped right out into space from the top of a tall tree, and had not been too afraid, but of course she could not boast to him. "See here," said Cloud, looking down at her again. "If you are brave and strong enough to play with the wind creatures, meet me out at the winged pine tomorrow morning at sunrise. I'm going on an errand for Tree Mother in that direction, and if you're there, I'll take you with me." "Oh, but that isn't fair," protested the Tree Girl. "How can a little human go all that distance before dawn, and find her way too?" Now the Tree Man spoke. "That's for the little human to find out," he said in his deep, clear voice. "I shall try to be there," promised Hepatica, "and I may truly go with you." "Yes, if you are there," Cloud assured her, and again she met the laughing glance of his purple eyes. He took his mended sandal from the Tree Girl, and saying goodbye, went leaping away down the forest path. When he was quite out of sight, Hepatica asked if she could pick the berries for the Tree Girl. So Tree Girl gave her a basket made of leaves and told her where she would find the largest and sweetest berries. All the rest of that day Hepatica spent in open, sunny places between the trees, gathering the little sweet wild strawberries for the tree folks' winter jam. But she was not lonely. There were so many birds and flowers to see, so many smells to smell, and so much music to hear. She wished, it is true, that the Tree Man would come and talk to her, for she thought that while he was talking she would somehow manage to hear that thing the brook was saying over and over to her, for when the Tree Man spoke, all the forest sounds took meaning behind his words. She thought about Cloud too, as she picked, and she was quite determined to find the winged pine before dawn tomorrow. How surprised Cloud would be to see her there. Surely Tree Mother could tell her the way. Dusk came in the woods almost too soon. She had supper with the tree people, who were surprised and pleased to see that she had filled her basket up to the top. "That will make many little jars of jam," cried the Tree Girl, clapping her hands in pleasure. They ate a supper of milk, brown bread, and nuts out of doors but near the tree house. When the first ray of moonlight slanted down between the trees, Hepatica said good night and ran away in the dusk to Tree Mother's stairs.